Now to the two new reports on the use of drones by the United States, which raise the issue of whether the U.S. has committed war crimes by using the unmanned, remote-controlled aircraft. Colin Campbell is in Washington, D.C. with what's in the reports by Amnesty International and the Human Rights Watch. Hi, Colin.
Hi, Debbie. Well, it's well known that the relations between Pakistan and the U.S. have been strained, especially since the 2011 raid on Osama bin Laden's compound. Now, this week, Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif is visiting the White House, and he says that drone strikes must end, especially near the western border and parts of North Waziristan, where he says they have become a major irritant to Pakistanis and has been a big blister between relations between the U.S. and Pakistan. He's calling for those drone strikes to end. Amnesty International released those two reports, and it says obtaining information for those reports has not been easy.
Challenging situation we had to face was the complete and utter secrecy of the U.S. authorities. Because of that, we cannot be 100% certain, but we are extremely concerned that these and other killings documented in our report may constitute extrajudicial executions or war crimes.
Prime Minister Sharif has already met with Secretary of State John Kerry this week, and he again reiterated his call for an end to U.S. drone strikes in Pakistan.
The war against terrorism must be waged within the framework of international law. The use of armed drones in the border areas of Pakistan is a continued violation of our territorial integrity. It results in casualties of innocent civilians and is detrimental to our resolve and efforts to eliminate extremism and terrorism from Pakistan. I have urged the United States of America to cease these strikes so that we could avert further casualties and suffering.
Part of the Human Rights Report was also on Yemen. Between 2009 and 2013, it reports that there have been 80 strikes resulting in the deaths of 473 people. But the U.S. is only acknowledging 2 of those deaths. The Human Rights Watch group says the U.S. is guilty of a double standard.
The U.S. government has also refused to disclose who it believes it's at war with. The U.S. has said it's in an armed conflict with al-Qaeda and associated forces, but has not disclosed who those associated forces are. So the United States has a set of secret rules about when it can kill its enemies and a secret list of those enemies.
Washington Post is also reporting that Amnesty International's report on Pakistan-U.S. drone strikes says that between May 2012 and July 2013, there have been more than 30 people killed in about 4 drone strikes. There, Debbie.
Right. Thank you very much for that update, Colin. Do appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Andrea Prasow is senior counter-terrorism counsel that we just heard from, and she's also advocate at the Human Rights Watch, who published the report about civilian drone casualties in Yemen. She joins us via Skype from Washington, and right here in the New York City studio is Tarek Ismail. He is a counter-terrorism and human rights fellow at the Columbia University School for International and Public Affairs. Andrea, thank you so much for being here with us. I do appreciate it, and Tarek, welcome to Arise America to both of you. Andrea, I want to start off with you. Have you gotten any reaction from the Bush administration to this report?
You know, we haven't
Excuse me, the Obama administration. I'm so sorry.
That's right. We haven't heard anything formal from the Obama administration. We did write to them several weeks before the report was published, and we asked very specific questions about the killings that we had documented. And we didn't receive any response from the White House. We did receive a response from the CIA, but it was a short note that said that we should contact the White House for comment.
Okay, very interesting. So what do you want to be done with this information that's published in the report?
First, we're calling for increased transparency. The Obama administration has not been transparent about the legal framework that it believes applies to targeted killings in Yemen, Pakistan, Somalia, and anywhere else they may be carried out. We're also calling for investigations. We've documented what we believe are unlawful killings in at least 2 cases, and in 4 other cases, we documented what we believe may be unlawful killings.
All right.
Those killings need to be investigated.
Okay, Andrea, sit tight for a second. I want to talk to Tarek, who's right here next to me. So where is your major concern? Is it with the drone program in general, or how it is administered?
I think it's important here to emphasize that the weapon itself is not the issue. I think time and again, advocates, human rights advocates have emphasized that the weapon platform is not the issue. Drones have the potential to be precise, But in this instance, we're seeing that individuals are being, civilians are being taken out by a precise weapons platform, which indicates that there's something awry with the way that the weapons are being used. And so, as Andrea says, transparency is necessary both at the individual level, looking at the various strikes that have been documented in this report and the report by Amnesty International, and at the more broad level, looking at the policy that governs those strikes.
I understand the need for transparency. You know, the greatest sterilizer is light in this regard. But is this an intelligence issue in terms of the number of non-military civilian casualties? Is there a need for reform more in our intelligence community or with this weapon?
Well, the government is telling us that they do post-strike assessments of each strike that they undertake, and they also tell us that drones offer them the capacity to do the best intelligence gathering that they can do. Here we're seeing that intelligence is not up to snuff, or that the government is acting before they have really good intelligence to act upon. The government and the military, in certain instances, has had the opportunity to capture these individuals, and the president in May said that capturing is the first priority before taking out an individual in a strike. And we're seeing here that the military is not following the rules that the president set out just a few months ago.
Yeah, you know, Andrea, isn't there a bit of a quandary here? You know, as I understand it from what I read, you know, the drone policy is a bit tricky, is messy. There is intelligence information that's at stake here. There has to, in most cases, be some sort of cooperation or corroboration with the officials in the area. In this particular case, Pakistan. I know you guys did the report on Yemen, and then of course there's then the public outcry after it. So is not the Obama administration, the U.S. government, sort of between a rock and a hard place?
You know, it's funny you say that because the title of our report is Between a Drone and Al-Qaeda, because that's what one witness told us he feels. He's stuck between a U.S. drone on the one hand and Al-Qaeda on the other. So what we've documented are the effects that these drone strikes have had and other types of airstrikes have had on Yemeni civilians. Strikes where civilians were killed, or an intended target was killed, but many civilians were also killed, or the intended target wasn't even present. We've documented people who ran to the site of a drone to see that their loved ones were covered in flour and sugar because they were killed on their way home from the market. And these strikes are really tragic, and they need to be accounted for. It doesn't require any intelligence sharing to admit that civilians were killed, presumably by accident, and to provide some sort of compensation for those deaths.
You know, in many professional circles, you know, it's often said that you can't really talk about a problem unless you come to the table with a solution. So what do you think, Andrea, would be a better alternative?
Well, it's important to understand that we're not calling for an end to the targeted killing program, and we aren't opposed to the use of drones per se. But the question is, are they being used lawfully? We've also documented instances where we believe, as Tarek said, that the president's policy, which was set forth in May, has not been followed. And of course, when the president announced his new policy, he said that some elements of it had already been implemented and others would be in the future. We have no idea when those components of the policy were implemented, so we don't know whether they were in place at the time of the strikes we investigated. But what we do know is that civilians have been killed, there have been unlawful killings of many civilians, and that there's really a serious impact on the Yemeni population, which now fears the U.S. sometimes as much as they fear al-Qaeda.
Yeah, and Tarek, I want to ask you, what do you think the consequence? I mean, there's really been some strong language used in both of these reports about international law being broken and war crimes. What should be the consequence?
Well, here, I mean, I think Andrea pointed to a few takeaways. I mean, the government really does need to come out and live up to the promises that the president made just in May. They need to be more transparent with respect to the policies that the government the government says it abides by. And in these instances, there need to be thorough investigations of these allegations. These are very serious allegations that civilians have been killed in these strikes, and they're corroborated. And as such, there needs to be pressure on the president. It's coming here from these reports, and Congress also needs to put that pressure on the executive.
Very briefly, I want to hear your thoughts from both of you. I'll start with you, Tarek. You know, I think that American sentiment is very much in support of drones because it keeps boots off the ground. So what is it that you would say to the popular opinion with this line of thinking?
I don't think that American sentiment is at odds with the reports that are coming out today. I think a lot of the sentiment that you're talking about comes from a place of the lack of transparency. So if the Americans did hear, if the American public heard about reports of individuals, grandmothers, 60-year-old grandmothers being shot down from the sky while picking okra from a farm for no good reason, I think the American public would wake up. But here the drone program is under a shroud of secrecy, and as such, the American public doesn't have a chance to react.
Andrea, your thoughts?
This isn't about whether drones are a good idea or not, or whether the U.S. should be using them in Yemen or Pakistan or so on, but this is about complying with the law, whether it's the United States or whether it's any one of the many other countries that are developing drone technology. They need to be complying with international law, both because it's the right thing to do and because it sends a dangerous message to other nations that civilians apparently can be killed with impunity.
All right, Andrea Prasow with the Human Rights Watch, Tarek Ismail, thank you both very much.
Thank you.